Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. Really, it's just a kind of an open meeting, kind of like a town hall here this evening. Maybe that's what we should call these. What I've been thinking about the last few days is this idea that a couple of ideas. Number one of the things that I know as a therapist is that what can help us through our pain, even our fear, is the sense of being connected. When I've worked with people who've experienced loss and pain that I cannot fix, they still find some comfort in not being alone. I think I've shared the story that after I was diagnosed with MS several years ago, I called a friend, not even a close friend, not my best friend, but on the way home from the doctor, a friend who I knew had several members of his family who had multiple sclerosis. He's actually one of the Osmonds, and several of the Osmonds, the Donnie and Marie Osmond family, several of the Osmonds have multiple sclerosis. So I called him and I just said, "Hey, Tyler," and I got choked up and I said, "I was just diagnosed with MS." And he's a young guy, he's in his 20s, and he said to me, "You're not alone." And I didn't even know that I needed to hear that. And I took some comfort in that immediately. So part of what we're trying to create tonight is just some resources, just some connection. Like I said, it won't be content heavy. The other thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is when our sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that gets us alert and ready to respond to a threat, gets alerted or goes online, right? And our adrenal glands are triggered from our brain to release epinephrine into our body, or adrenaline, same thing, into our body. That produces our ability to respond physically quickly to a threat or to a danger. And it can be dangerous if we don't have an outlet for it. It can be harmful, especially if we are exposed to chronic, moderate, and low levels of anxiety. It can affect the heart. It can affect our arteries, our veins and arteries, in terms of how they respond to how they become less elastic. It can increase our blood pressure, and maybe most importantly, at the time of COVID-19, it attacks the immune system, and we none of us need that right now. So we have two choices when we are upregulated, when our nervous system is upregulated. Choice number one is to do something, and that can be helpful. Working out, finding a project. I talked about that the last two nights, doing something with that extra energy. Somebody was tweeting today about stress cleaning. That can help to do it. I've had the opportunity, luckily, to be working still. And so this helps me with some of the stress that I'm feeling. And also it provides a distraction, because nobody can be consumed constantly with the threat and the energy that's out there, the anxiety. So number one we can do with that energy that's produced by our body naturally is we can do something. But with this particular challenge that we all have, sometimes there's not a lot to do. And we are limited in some of the activities that we can do. We can walk, exercise at home, but we're still limited, some of us. So the second thing we can do is do what we need to do to down-regulate the nervous system. And one of the ways that we can do that is through meditation. So I'm going to just bring us into, somebody shared with me last night when I said that I was going to do a short breathing exercise for 4 or 5 minutes. They emailed me and said out loud, they said, "No, I'm not going to do this." And then they decided to do that and said that it might be helpful. So we're just going to practice some square breathing, where we're going to breathe in for a count of four and out for a count of four. And I might give you some other guidance doing it. If you get distracted, if there's a sound in the background, if your mind goes to some other place, I want you to be kind to yourself and just observe that. Um, See if you can bring yourself back to the exercise, back to my voice. Very, very important in meditation is that you just observe and that you don't judge, because we spend so much time judging ourselves. We try to give ourselves some relief from that threat that really comes from within. So, having said that, find whatever is comfortable for you where you're sitting. Um, Take a couple of moments. I'm going to start us on an exhale. I'm going to tell you to exhale, and then I'm going to uh, tell you to breathe in. Well, actually, I'm just going to do it. So, if it helps you to close your eyes and lower your breath, excuse me, lower your gaze or close your eyes, you can start with that. I'll encourage you first to breathe through your nose, both in and out through your nose, because that signals to the body and to the brain that you're not under a threat. And just observe your breath. You don't have to change it or slow it. It's okay to make adjustments to your breath or to your body to get more comfortable. There's no right way to do this. Sometimes when we observe our breath, it does tend to slow. When you're breathing out, I want you to repeat in your mind, I'm breathing out. When you're breathing in, I want you to repeat in your mind, I'm breathing in. Now I'm going to invite you to deepen your breath on a 4 count. And in just a moment, I want you to start with a complete exhale. So exhale all the way, and then breathe in on a count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat that just for a few moments. You can repeat in your mind when you're breathing in, I'm breathing in. And on your exhale, you can repeat in your mind, I'm breathing out. That's all you have to do right now is breathe. There's nothing else you need to do but breathe. We'll go for about 3 more deep breaths in and out. If you want, before we open your eyes, just notice if there's any part of your body where you're holding tension. And go to it. Be kind to it and offer it to release itself from the tension. And when you're ready, you can raise your gaze and open your eyes. Thank you. Welcome. I'm just going to take some comments and questions for those of you who may have joined us a little bit late. There's no format that's formal for this. This is just me providing a venue to connect. On Monday, we're going to open this up and we're going to have the names be public. So we'll announce that on our invitation, and I'll announce it before I make them public, so that you can have a chance to log out if you want to keep yourself anonymous. But some of you actually know each other, and it'd be nice to connect. So I'll just read some of the comments and some of the questions. Somebody says here, let me see if I make this go like this. Someone says lots of good resources. The Center for Mindful Learning in West Los Angeles had a webinar today, opening up their programs for free. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm just going to cut and paste these for all of you to see. Someone else says, anxiety, kids still at college, trying to focus on what I can control. Anxiety, I assume they are not staying home. Both are in cities that are on lockdown. Anxiety, if they come home, and old roles and triggers will be there, as they are now adult children, and will have their own schedules and schoolwork to do. Fear of them coming home, but yet wanting them to come home. That's really well said. I think that's the way that a lot of people are feeling. I had a friend today. I thought this was, I don't know if this applies to you, but I thought this was incredibly intelligent and insightful. Somebody living in a big metropolitan area has a young adult coming home soon, and they decided that they were going to offer that child an Airbnb close to where they live. So they were close enough that if there was an emergency, they could get to each other. And this child wouldn't even think of it as an insult, but it really provided them the space that they needed. It's hard to move back in. If I had to move back in with my mother today, that would be hard for me, and that would be hard for her. So I thought that was a really ingenious idea and a really intentional, a mindful way of looking at our triggers and finding some alternative solutions. In general, with our anxiety, it's important to notice it and to be responsible as best we can to limit our triggers, right? Find ways to not expose ourselves to our triggers. That's healthy self-care. And most of all, that we are kind to ourselves. Every family in the world, every family I've ever met experiences some regression when they get in close quarters for any length of time. You know that from holidays. And so be kind to yourself about that regression. Be kind to your children about that regression. Even if they're young adults, you might think of them as more like peers or adults, but they're really just 12-year-old children to you. They'll always be 12-year-old children to you in a deep psychological way. And so just be mindful of that. I think I shared with you last night that Ben Lerner, Harriet Lerner's son, who wrote the novel, the Pika School, New York Times bestselling novel, and she was sharing this story about her son in his sophomore year of college, and as he was being picked up by his father and driving home from the airport during the holidays, Ben said to his father, Harriet tells the story, he said, I can feel the layers of maturity coming off me the closer that I get to home. And that's not an indictment, folks, on anybody. I think we have this idealized idea about how we're supposed to be. This time is stressful for all of us. And the kinds of situations and circumstances that we're going to find ourselves in are not going to be easy for any of us to negotiate. So I love what Thich Nhat Hanh says. He says, treat your anxiety like you would a little child and say, I'm here for you. It's from a book called You Are Here, one of my very favorite books, You Are Here by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he says, treat your depression and your anxiety like you would a little child and say, I'm here for you. What do you need? I think so much of the time when we think about little children, we think about what we're going to impart to them, but what little children need is just to be listened to and understood. And I always like that idea of taking the feeling, the vulnerable feeling, the uncomfortable feeling, and holding it like I would a little child. And remembering that your anxiety and your fear is connected to the things that you care about. I'm just going through some of the other comments. Thank you for that one. Somebody's giving us a website. Oh, I'll post it. Takes me a second to post it the way that I'm doing it so that I can keep everything confidential. Ready.gov/cert. Here's the program I am volunteering with. It's part of FEMA, and there are programs all over the country. Can you tell us a little bit about I know what you're talking about because we talked today on the phone, but can you tell us a little bit more about the kinds of things that they're providing for people? I'll go back to that. Oh, the name of the book? You Are Here. And I'm going to spell Thich Nhat Hanh's name for you because it's not how you would think. It's THICHNHATHANH. So one more time. Maybe you can write this on the public one, Keisha, while I'm saying it. Just type it in and press return on the public chat. Thich Nhat Hanh, THICHNHATHANH. Thich Nhat Hanh. Wonderful. You are here. Someone else has another resource. This makes me so happy. Here's a free day seminar on mindfulness. You can jump in and out to fit your schedule. And the website is mindfullivingsummit.com. I'm going to tell you a story about this. I think this is interesting. You know, can you some of the other suggestions, Keisha, can you click on copy and then paste them to the public? So I mindfulness is a very different idea than most of us in the West think of it. I'll tell this little story. Some of you have heard this before, but I had a friend and a colleague who was a ultra runner. He ran 210-mile races. His coach was, in fact, one of the men that ran across the Sahara Desert. They did a documentary called Running the Sahara. My friend was studied under him or trained under him. And when I was training for my Ironmans, I asked him one time. His name is Will Laughlin, and I asked Will. I said, Will, what advice do you have as I get prepared for? I think it was my first Ironman, and he said, well, when you're running, either training or race, and when you're in the race, if you feel a pain or a discomfort, he said, concentrate on it, focus on it. He said most Western approaches are to try to avoid pain, discomfort. He said, I want you to concentrate on it. And if it's an injury, then you're going to need to stop. And if it's not an injury, it'll work itself out. And I've thought about that ever since, both psychologically, metaphorically speaking, but also realistically thinking. Some time ago, I was running in a marathon in Phoenix, Arizona, the Rock and Roll Marathon, and I knew I was dealing with a nagging kind of slight injury to my calf. Didn't know if I was going to finish the race. So I'm about 6 or 7 miles in, and I said to my good friend who I was training with, I said, I think I'm not going to be able to finish this. So I can't keep up this pace. Why don't you go ahead without me? He was a little bit faster than me anyway. And so I concentrated on my calf. I didn't favor it because favoring it is where you actually injure yourself. Think about that. Favoring pain is where you injure yourself. That's profound, I think. So I concentrated on my calf as much as I could, thought about it, felt it, paid attention to it, tried not to favor it. And I can't even believe this worked, but somewhere around mile 10 or so, it went away. And I finished with my fastest race time ever. I came in 30 seconds behind my friend. I almost caught up to him. Didn't even know I was that close to him. I thought he was long gone. But I think that that lends itself well to our pain and discomfort. Like lean into it. Now, like I've talked about the last few days, it doesn't mean that you feed it, right? It doesn't mean that you feed your discomfort by seeking out social media and anger in the media and political conflict in the media. I'm not saying that. That's different. But when you feel, in fact, you might have to turn that off. You might have to practice what I called the other night social media distancing, right? But we can lean into it. We can learn to feel it and we can treat it like the vulnerable child in us that it is. All right. Another one. There's so much fear, and perhaps rightfully so, about COVID-19. And what if we subscribe to the philosophy that life is always working out for us, that there is an intelligence far greater than humans at work, that all is interconnected? What if the virus is here to help us, to reset, to remember what is truly important, reconnecting with family and community, reducing travel so that the environment, the skies, the air, and our lungs get a break? Parts of China are seeing the blue sky and clouds for the first time in forever, with the factories being shut down. Working from home rather than commuting to work, less pollution, more personal time, reconnecting with the family as there is more time at home. An invitation to turn inwards, a deep meditation, rather than the usual extroverted going out to self-soothe. To reconnect with self, what is really important to me? A reset economically, the working poor, the lack of health care access for over 30 million in the United States, the need for paid sick leave. How hard does one need to work to be able to live, to have a life outside of work, to face our mortality, check back into living life rather than simply working, 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 to reconnect with our elders who are so susceptible to the virus, and washing our hands. How did that become a new thing that we needed to remember? But yes, we did. The presence of grace for all. There's a shift underway in our society. What if what if it is one that is favorable for us? What if the virus is an ally in our evolution? I think this is the same. In our remembrance of what it means to be connected, humane, living a simpler life, to be less impactful, more kind to our environment, an offering from my heart this morning, offered as another perspective, another way of relating to the virus, this unfolding, this evolution. It was time for a change. We all knew that. And change has arrived. What if? And the above is by, I'll try to pronounce it correct, Gurpreet K. Gill. Somebody said to me today, I was talking to somebody, just reaching out to connect. And somebody was saying to me today that they were looking for those silver linings. And I think I'm hearing this now in the dialogue. I think I'm hearing this awakening, this to talk about how the canals in Venice are clearer than they've been in decades, that the dolphins are returning to the shores in Italy, right? Some of the things that are mentioned in this prose that we just read. Um, People reprioritizing and finding out what's important. When I got multiple sclerosis, I was at the doctor yesterday. I had to get my monthly infusion of medication, which was a scary place to go to a hospital clinic, but I have to do that. And uh, the nurse was asking me about it. I'd never seen her before. I think they were limiting the nurses, and so the nurse that was giving my infusion, she said, "How was it? How long have you had it? How's this medication working?" And I said, the first 2 weeks I was pretty depressed. I felt pretty hopeless. It lasted around 2 weeks. But then after that, it's been a gift. After that, I've been grateful. My symptoms are pretty mild, pretty moderate, and are mostly manifested by numbness and tingling in my hands and feet. And on bad days, it grows a little bit more. Sometimes I have a pain in the neck because that's where most of my lesions are. Um, but what it does is it reminds me every day for what I do have still, that I can touch the ground and feel it. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, in the book that I shared with you, he said, "What's the first thing that we realize when we get a toothache?" And what he suggests is when the first time we get a toothache, we think to ourselves, boy, I've been taking the non-toothache for granted. And I always think that when I get a cold, when I get sick, I realize how much I've been taking for granted my health. But mindfulness is to appreciate the non-toothache in our lives every day. And if we don't have a practice of mindfulness, maybe something like this virus can remind us of the things that we have forgotten about. Something as simple as washing our hands, but maybe just connection. I talked to a couple of people today just to reach out and connect. And, when I did, I heard from them that that's what they're doing. And so maybe we are being reminded of the things that we haven't been paying attention to. And maybe it can invite us to live a more mindful life when all of this is over. Another article that's being shared by somebody is a New York Times article. 3 ways to help teens manage anxiety about the coronavirus. Keisha, make sure you cut and copy that instead of just pressing the click. Sorry, I know you're getting trained on the spot. So, great resources. Just leaving some space for comments or questions. Also, I said this last night, but if there's anything you want from me or from us that could be helpful, we're happy to provide that. Just cutting and pasting some things. Someone shares, here's a New York Times article that channels you, Brad. Why teens reject parents' solutions to their problems. I'm sure I would agree with that. I was talking about this last night. I think it's worth sharing again. The magic of listening. I just ran an intensive. And what this group did so beautifully and remarkably is they listened to each other. They resisted. Initially, there was a little bit of coaching that we did around this, but they resisted the urge to fix people, to be helpful. They resisted the urge to be helpful to each other when someone was sharing their painful story. And what came out of that lack of helpfulness is that the participants shared, more than one, that they had never felt so welcomed before. Imagine that. Listen to that. When we stopped people from providing solutions and helpful suggestions and ideas, when we stopped them from responding to the urge to be helpful, the people on the receiving end of that listening felt absolutely welcomed in ways that they said that they hadn't felt welcomed in years. It really does go to show you how little, how little we do that, how little we really, really share our emotions with each other. Excuse me, how really we allow people to share with us without trying to be fixed. So think about that sometimes when somebody's sharing something difficult. Think about resisting the urge to be helpful and how helpful that can be. Somebody says, I appreciate you sharing your emotions with us. It reminds me that it's okay for me to feel mine and that you just don't have to soldier through. You know, thank you. You're welcome. This little experience we're having right now, this is like just a little bit about what finding you feels like, right? It's so fun when people come to the intensive works that we do. It's so fun because they start off nervous, unsure, six strangers with themselves, two staff members, and eventually they start to tell their story, talk about their feelings. And because we provide a safe place to do it and just witness it and just thank them for it, by the end of it, their response is, I've just never felt so safe and I don't want to leave. And it's okay and I'm normal and I'm not crazy. I mean, that's really the greatest gift. Now we do. I remember a couple of, or 18 months ago when I was leaving the field after working in a group for 2 months, covering for my partner on sabbatical. I remember saying to the adolescent boys, it was my last day. They knew it was my last day. And I was saying goodbye to 8 boys that I had come to love. You can't not love them once you get to know them in that way. And I was saying to them, I was saying, and I had no idea I was going to get this emotional, but I said to them, I said, I just want you guys to know that I love you and that you're okay. And I said, and you've done some stupid stuff, but nothing even compared to the stupid stuff that I've done. So you've done some dumb things. We all have. Everybody does. But you're okay. And if nothing else you got from me in my 8 weeks with you, I hope you'll have my voice in the back of your head when you do that thing or make that mistake for the 20th time and it's the stupidest thing in the world and you want to condemn yourself to hell. I hope you'll remember my voice telling you you're okay. And I've made probably the same mistake, probably more than you have. And I couldn't say that without sobbing and crying during it. But that's and the reason I say that to them is because that's what somebody's done to me. I made a mistake recently as a therapist, actually, in a therapy session. I said something that I, I that was out of character, and that was probably about my own countertransference feelings that had nothing to do with the client. So I go to my therapist. This is my last session, and I tell her what I did, and I told her what I did, and she playfully put her hand near to my head, near to on my head, and said, I forgive you, my son. And she was kind of just playfully saying, it's okay. She was also telling me about if you haven't seen the movie The Two Popes, if you're looking for a good movie to see, wonderful movie about the two sensibilities that we talk about often, which is the sensibility of kind of rules and dogma and right and wrong and behavior and love. And there's this great, great moment in the movie where the outgoing pope is talking to the incoming pope. And the outgoing pope is talking about that he knew about the child abuse. And I won't tell you how that conversation goes, but Just look at that, watch that. It's amazing. The two popes. I'm just kind of copying them and then pasting them. Keisha. Keisha wasn't even planning to be a presenter on this, and I'm putting her into a role. My kids, somebody says, my kids are not anxious about COVID-19. They are stressed about managing things at the house with family, chores, structure, schedule, digital learning, and siblings. Yeah, I don't think most of the kids are as stressed about it. I think it's everything else. Today was, even though my wife stays at home with the kids, this is the first day that school was done from home for us. And I asked both the kids how it was, and they said it was miserable, stir crazy. And I said, would you rather be at school? And I thought they were going to say no. I got to be in my pajamas and relax and have a soda or snack while I was listening to my history teacher. But they said no, they would rather be at school. And of course, they have the luxury of being kids and being innocent, and they also have the luxury that they're not in high risk group if they get it. Right? Our children are the least threatened by the virus themselves. So I'm grateful for that, actually. Grateful for that. Just copying and pasting more. It's good to see you guys. Some of you I haven't seen in a while. Someone is sharing a BBC News article on coronavirus. Kind Canadians start caremongering trend. Provides ideas on how to help those in need during this challenging time using social media groups organized by geographical area. So beautiful, so wonderful. Did you guys see that quote by Mr. Rogers that's going around? By the way, if you haven't seen A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, that's a great movie. I cannot believe what a great therapist Mr. Rogers was. And I couldn't stand him as a kid. I thought he was creepy. I thought he was talking down to me when I would turn past the channel with Mr. Rogers. And now as an adult, man, I wish he was my father. I wish he was my therapist. I wish he was in my life. But he talks about something that you're sharing. He says his mother always told him that when there's a crisis, a catastrophe, to look for the helpers because they're out there. And I think that's another thing that we're seeing. You know, in Buddhism, there's no duality, right? It's all one. And when there is a crisis, there is also compassion, right? There's healing, just like we're all talking about. There's love, there's opportunity. Where there's pain, there's love, and so forth. And so, some of what we're waking up to as we get into this pattern, and maybe that's where we were seeing in Italy before this continent, you know, got to where they are, when they were singing from their balconies, and we all saw that, and somebody was leading exercise out on the lawn, and everybody was following them. Maybe that's what they were feeling a week or two ago before we were, and now it's relatively new for us, newer than for them. And maybe that's what's starting to awaken in us Americans, or North Americans, I should say, because I have a couple of Canadian friends on here tonight. Maybe that's what we're waking up to. And the more I talk about it, and the more that it's only been a few days, a handful of days uh, for me, um, my awareness of the need for social distancing since about Thursday or Friday of last week. Um, I'm finding myself focusing more and more on the love and the connection and the joy. And how it's like the poem that somebody shared. How beautiful is that? Right? How amazing. What a an amazing part of this human experience. Mm. Just takes me a minute to cut and paste. One of our kids is high risk and in that category. So my teens have more structure than they would like. Yeah, I forgot about that. I'm in a high risk category because of the MS and I'm on immune suppressant. I'm not of the age where I would be in high risk, but I have to remember that it's not just age related, that people can have compromised immune systems or other health circumstances that can put them in a higher risk category for sure. And here is the link for the BBC article. I'm going to try to copy that. Copy. And paste it so that all of you can have it. I've just posted the URL for the BBC article on kind Canadians start caremongering. Now, if it's an article about kind Canadians, right? If it's an article about kind Canadians, then that's saying something because Canadians are kind in general. Yeah, but Keisha's saying that I can just click it, but then I'm afraid that their name shows up, Keisha. I'm not sure that all of them want to be non-anonymous. So that's why I'm just copying it and pasting it instead of just clicking check. So just trying to protect them. And I'm sorry if we've messed up that a couple of times. I apologize. I think challenges bring out kindness in all of us. Seems to be the case. I'm feeling it today. I'm feeling it a lot more each day as this goes along. Any other questions or anything you guys want to share? I'm just scrolling back and making sure I didn't miss anybody. That's a good question. Here's a good question I'm gonna post. There's a couple more coming in. Do you feel like you have to be productive? Well, in general, that's my problem. One of my problems. But during this time of social distancing, it's not the same for me. For me, I'll just speak for me, and maybe others can answer. You can answer these questions too. Um, you know, I don't know why I remember this one time, but I do remember this one time. Brett Favre, the American football quarterback, um, he had just lost his father. I believe this is the story. I believe I'm getting it right. If not, if I'm getting the details wrong, the story still is essentially true. He had just lost his father. And then he went out on a Monday night football game as quarterback and had one of the games of his life. And Robert Horry, he was a basketball player for the Los Angeles Lakers in the late 90s, early 2000s. And his nickname was Big Shot Bob. And the reason that he had the nickname of Big Shot Bob is because Robert Horry in clutch really, really high pressure situations was known for hitting the clutch shot. And when they asked Robert Horry why he was so good in clutch situations, and he said, and again, I don't know if I remember the details perfectly, but he said, I lost a daughter. So missing a basketball shot is nothing. It's nothing. And Brett Favre was asked about why he had such a good game just days after his father died, and he said, because it's not a big risk, right? It puts life into perspective. Tragedy puts life into perspective, and so I don't feel like I have to be productive these days because I can't sit still. I have to be productive because it gives me meaning. And sometimes work is a good distraction. I can't feel it all the time. I can't feel the stress of it all the time. And it's nice. I was telling you, I was recording my book, just recording it to a computer because I'm doing the voice for the book I just came out with. And and it was 3.5 hours of a break. For 3.5 hours, I was doing something that would eventually be helpful. And so I think sometimes production can help burn off the energy that comes to us when our brain is telling us there's a threat. I talked about that earlier. That's why exercise works. Cleaning can work, doing other things can work, service can work. But sometimes it's not necessarily a negative thing to say, do I have a project? I shared last night and the night before, like if there's a book that you haven't read, oh, I have a couple of recommendations for you all too. But if there's a book that you haven't read, if there's a project that you've been putting off, right? And I'm not saying to completely immerse yourself in that and dissociate from your family and from everybody, but there's some found time here, right? There's some found time that we can all put in. And you're not meant to be focusing on the problem 24/7. It's not good, not healthy to be focusing on the problem. These broadcasts, I'm doing them for you only if they're helpful. And this is the first live one we've done where it's just open, no format. Um, it helps me. For 1 hour, I get to feel love for you and from you. So I generally have the problem of needing to be productive. That's something I work on in my daily life, but right now it can be helpful. Somebody says, not always do I have to feel productive, but I like to be productive. A ball in motion stays in motion. Someone said, I am very thankful for the love I am feeling here this evening, even if I do not know who else is in attendance. Thank you, Brad, for bringing us together. You're welcome. It's good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Give love to your son from me. Someone says, not always lack of usual schedule, not always, sometimes, oh, about the production question, not always, sometimes the lack of usual schedule brings out short temperedness and snappy retorts. In response to challenges, bring out kindness in all of us. That is the ultimate goal and hope. Let me post this one because it's a little bit longer. I need glasses for some of these. What you said the other day about how we gather information to deal with serious problems, but in this case, all the information gathering doesn't give us a solution, which causes high anxiety. This really helped as I know a few white males, high paid, at the top of the food chain, freaking out about whether their wives bought enough groceries. It really baffled me why they were so stressed and made me feel more unstable and stressed. But the lack of control, given all the information out there, explained it and made me feel better. Right. I'm going to repeat that for people that weren't on. Thank you for that. In general, when we focus on things that we cannot control, we have anxiety, right? And so that's why, for example, in recovery programs, we say the serenity prayer. The serenity prayer, if you don't know, it goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I remember when I was introduced to the serenity prayer at somewhere 16 years old. And I thought, what the hell does that have to do with substance use? Why at every recovery program, every recovery group, 12-step group in the world, do they say that prayer at the end? It made no sense to me. Of course, now I understand it. When you can't control something, you feel unwell. And for those of us who have anxiety, if you fit in that category, and I sure do, one of the ways that we deal with our anxiety is we worry. We it's not dealing with our anxiety. We worry about something. Alexander Hamilton said this. I won't get the quote exactly right, but he said, "What people call genius in me is when I put my mind to a subject and I concentrate on it day and night, day after day. I obsess over it. I study, I read, I write about it. And then what comes out later on, people are happy to call genius when really it's just the great effort that goes into it. And that's kind of what we do with our anxiety, right? We think about things that we see something that goes on and we get addicted to information because we think if we worry about it enough, we can prevent more pain. We can solve the problem. Some of this we cannot solve by doing. In fact, some of it we can only contribute to the solution by doing less, by staying in some ways. So it presents, I think, a wonderful life lesson for those of us who struggle with anxiety. It really, really does. And what I said the other night also is um, maybe it gives us a little empathy for our children because this is the way the world feels to them a little bit more every day. Not the exact same, but now you can understand why they resort to self medicating and escapism. Somebody says, I feel that way from having a child who was struggling enough to go to wilderness. It changed me forever. Most of the things roll off of me now, and my gratitude is present most days. I can relate to that. Thank you for sharing. Hold on, I'm just reading this. Somebody just said that the silver lining for them is that their child is here in the program instead of in the big city that they live in. You know, if gratitude were about who has the most, then wealthy, successful people with beautiful families wouldn't kill themselves, right? And everybody who's struggling financially or had health problems or had family difficulties and trauma, they would, right? Gratitude is something else. And for me, I think it comes out of mindfulness, a practice of mindfulness to feel everything. I find myself thinking about Anne Frank, who was in hiding for 761 days. No sunlight, not able to utter a sound. It keeps me grounded and grateful. That's a great thought. Oh, the other movie I was going to share with you, everybody on here who's heard me talk before. Um, Someone just said, sending love to you all. I'll post that because you should all see it, not just me. Oh, this is a good question. Um, oh, the movies. If you've been to Evoke or talked to me, um, this is something that has given my life meaning and perspective in times like these because I think we get very myopic sometimes in our lives. And I think this virus is expanding our awareness, as a lot of you are sharing. But Finding Joe, you can rent it on iTunes for $2.99, I think. Finding Joe by Patrick Solomon. And you can stream on Amazon Prime The Power of Myth, which is a 6-part series of interviews by Bill Moyers on Joseph Campbell. For me, I think it gives perspective because I think when you get to look at the entire world over all of recorded history, it gives you perspective about what we're going through today. And there's a lot of answers to myths, to stories for today that were written thousands of years ago by cultures that had no contact with outside society, but are the same themes that you and I are dealing with today. Someone says, how much should we be talking to our teens about COVID-19, protecting them and limiting what they hear? You know, mostly what I would say is be mindful and generally speaking, ask questions what they need. Definitely, of course, with the children that live in your home that are under 18, you can be very directive about the behavior. You can have boundaries around behavior and hand washing and contact with people in the outside world. Obviously, that's within your purview. But in terms of the amount of it's difficult, right? Because we want them to be scared enough, right? That's what I think with my kids. I want you to be scared enough to not do something stupid, something careless, but I don't want you to be scared that it starts to impact your mental health, right? There's a healthy fear when a lion is running at you. There's a healthy fear response, right? When a car is heading to you and you're walking across the street, there's a healthy fear response. So ask questions, listen. I think just the answer would be for me is just enough information, and then keep the boundaries really clear. But be mindful of the fact that our need and our anxiety can easily spill on over to them. Absolutely. All right, it looks like we're out of time. So someone says one last comment. My silver lining is that my daughter is safe at school getting her therapies and not isolated here at home. Well, I don't know if these are helpful or not. I hope they are. I feel the love from you. Um, um, I just want you to know that we're not alone, that I'm with you. I like to take a moment and look over the list. Some of you I know because your first and last names are on there. And I've met you and talked to you, and it's good to see some old friends. And I wish we were re-meeting under different circumstances. Um, somebody said my son just said, "Tell him I'm incredibly grateful for Evoke." That makes me happy. Someone says, "Thank you, we love you all and are grateful for everything. My kiddo can't wait to come back for a refresher." One more. Um, somebody said that was amazingly helpful. Intellectually, somebody says, "I'm aware that we are not in total control regarding contracting COVID. That said, I see so many ways to find authority. We can follow medical hygiene protocols. We can be role models to our kids who struggle through demonstrating flexibility to challenges and how to weather disappointments related to COVID with grace. As you say, the silver linings are becoming obvious. We are beginning to solidify as a community. We are supporting each other. Thank you for these meetings online. For me, I feel connected to you and the other participants, and this is greatly comforting. Thank you. Happy birthday. Just wishing somebody a birthday. All right. I love you guys. And thanks for being part of the family tonight. I'll do this tomorrow at 11 o'clock Mountain Time. And then on Monday, we're going to do it where you can see each other's names. We'll make it very clear so that if you don't want your actual name to be on there or just your first name or just your initials, I would love to see each other in at least some way, even if it's just initials. And especially because some of you know each other and some of you have attended intensives together and some of you are friends and some of you have been to parent support groups together and some of you have had children in the same group. So I feel so honored to be here tonight, to be the hub of this wheel for this discussion tonight. I love you so much. Take care. Keep safe with your families, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.